An interesting week. It's been a very eventful week. But all things said, man, best quote I heard this week is comparison is the thief of joy. So I'm comparing myself today with myself yesterday. And I'm doing pretty good, man. How you doing?
No, that's good. I like that quote. I'm definitely stealing that.
That's still it's Theodore Roosevelt, so it's not me. Like
If you put your own spin on it, it's yours now.
that's true. I stole it. That's mine now.
Yeah. But yeah. So for anyone that's new, Bank Shots, where we covered the news and moves of the modern athlete, myself, a frugal athlete, and Jed Collins, fullback of finance, new and improved trademark name. We just covered different current events from the athlete money management standpoint. So let's break it down. Olympians in financial limbo. Saw this article on Front Office Sports. Shout out to Front Office Sports.
Big
Obviously,
shout out.
2020 has been affected by COVID-19. A lot of Olympians that thought they were going to, do big things, have to wait until next year. So how does this affect their finances when you come into a situation where it's like, all right, these sponsors are going to pay me this much. I'm going to be able to, do well, get a bunch of commercials, get a bunch of deals, and then now everything's pushed back a year. Like, what happens then?
A year with a question mark at the end of that year. And you start to look at it, and this is why planning is so essential, because every journey, every trip has a flat tire, has a wrong turn. It has situations that are outside of your control. Olympians in particular, and this is what is so interesting about how kind of the economy circles and works. It's not just the athletes, it's the organizations that support those athletes. So for me, it's a financial conundrum of saying, hey, technically the faucet has been turned off. You kind of just retired, much like professional athletes the day they walk away from their game. The events not being there is a drastic hit that you really cannot overcome. So it is really interesting to me to see how diversified some of these Olympians were. They, I mean, would get money from sponsorships and have to be humane and understand businesses are struggling. They would get money from the events and they have to see, well, those events are gone, so my titles and things there are gone. Go out and speak at companies. And yet I do public speaking, that is dried up. And then a lot of them, because these are, Olympic athletes, they have to have side jobs. And even in that article, it talks about some of those being furloughed. So you look at the diversification from an income perspective, they were trying. But this is one of those hurdles and one of those issues that are being dealt with in the country that I don't think there's really an easy fix to outside of the way they're pivoting and going to fundraising. This is Team USA. This is America. This is that Olympic dream. Do you still want to support that? I mean, how do you kind of see this as an athlete, and as well as just how Olympics handles this going forward?
No, I mean, you brought up a great point early. It's like you said, 2021 with the question mark. And as an Olympic hopeful, you work 4 years to get to this point, and then it gets pushed back. So yes, you have been planning, but like you said, you always got to have that, that spare tire in the trunk of your car, because you really just never know. So from this perspective of an Olympian, obviously, you get the country's pride behind. So I like this fundraising idea. I'm not sure how well it can work because, like you said before, everyone is struggling. So
Mhm.
as much as you can use like USA Pride or country pride to get behind, some of the things that you may be facing, like those same people are facing some of the same issues as well.
And they are. And I love Alex's comment around the cash flow quadrant, being able to see, different ways and opportunities of raising those funds. And it also it presents a kind of a moral or a theoretical conundrum as well. Not only do we have to measure the financial solvency of the Olympics at the moment, but we also have to measure what does the Olympic dream still mean to the United States. It talks about that there's no government support. Most other countries have some kind of function or support for these athletes. So Team USA, best in the world, or at least the best representation of our country of what they do. how are we going to support them financially? And does that Olympic dream still hold enough value in our society today to be able to either fundraise for it or have some kind of government support? It was interesting to see a lot of the organizations that do support the Olympics have already filed for the same benefits that a normal business would and have been getting support from those monthly checks. But the other aspect of this is the future of Olympians. If there is not even a possibility of a financial support and financial system, you look at the thousands of young people who are chasing that Olympic dream as an outlet, as an escape from some kind of, community, culture, system, whatever you want, that they are trying to elevate out of. And if we are starting to no longer weigh and value this Olympic system, this Olympic dream, to support those athletes, all of those dreams die with it. And so for me, the idea around fundraising is, let's support these current athletes because they are our representation. But more importantly, we got to keep the Olympic dream alive, or else all of those young people will no longer have their escape or their outlet to what some are dealing with.
No, that's a great point, and I liken it to the American dream. You got to have that light at the end of the tunnel. Why so many people love America, why so many people risk their lives to come to America for a better life. It's similar to the Olympics, and every 4 years we get together as a nation to follow and support these athletes that represent their countries, specifically being from the United States, to represent the United States and put their best foot forward. So like you said, moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see how we as a nation protect these athletes and give them that Olympic dream for the Olympic hopefuls, that are looking to, better themselves, better their communities, and better their families.
And better their families. Most of them are supporting not only themselves, but their families. And this is exactly what we are talking about. As modern day athletes, you have to be able to measure. Nobody could predict or see this coronavirus or this pandemic coming, but why we need to plan, why it is so vital and important, is because you cannot predict when things like this happen, but you can be prepared for it. And that is, I think, a lesson that, hey, if the Olympic Committee, if some teams need some financial literacy, I know two cats that can dial them up for them.
No, respect. And that's a great segue. You talked about being prepared. High school athletes, we want to talk about LaMelo Ball. There's an article on ESPN, a real good article, obviously, with the NBA draft lottery pick coming out, about LaMelo Ball and high school athletes and their stardom. Like, now you see high school athletes, specifically basketball and football, Instagram followers are more than professional athletes. Like, you're a pro at 14, 15 years old. People will see you at your AAU games and follow, and really, like, you're a professional athlete. So how, like, give us some context to, like, how athletes at this age and the parents that are managing these athletes, taking care of them, raising them, how should they start thinking about, not only professionally, like long term, but from a business standpoint? Like, how early do you think of yourself as a business at this high school level now?
The moment somebody tells you the dream can become a reality. And for many of these young players, that's middle school nowadays, definitely early on in high school. And I liken it to looking at equities, so small cap, large cap stocks. As a middle schooler, high schooler, you're a small cap stock. Somebody loves to have the story that they invested in a company here and it escalated and found it here. If somebody were to say, hey, I followed, LeBron James from when he was 9 years old, that is the storyline people love to say. Right now, you look at companies like Shopify, people are going crazy because they guessed right. And so that intrigue really presents itself. As you start to look at when that model starts to shift is when, as a young person, you have to make that decision. I no longer am enjoying practice. I no longer love, getting up and doing everything, but I'm going to do it. That's when it becomes a business. That's when you start to weigh this long-term vision of getting to where you want to go. And you as a family have to really decide this is what we want. And it can, oftentimes it is being pushed by the parent, but it has to be an internal drive. And that drive is awakening to you to this modern day mindset of what the athlete has to do. You made an early decision in your career. When do you see the athlete starting to act like a business?
It's really crazy because, like you said, I had the fortunate pleasure of going to residency at 15 years old. But even then, I wasn't thinking like, okay, I'm going pro. This is what's going to happen. At 15, I was like, this is a unique opportunity. I get to go to school for free, travel the world, compete at a high level, and ultimately possibly compete for the U17 World Cup. But now it's like you're in 8th grade and these schools are like, all right, we want you to commit now. Or agents are reaching out to your parents and saying, we'll make sure you are good for the next 4 years. Just make sure you sign with us when the draft comes. And it's like, I could never even think of that during my years. And it's just to see how crazy it's changed over the 10 years. Obviously, soccer is a little bit different from some of the major sports, basketball, football, baseball particularly. But when you think of it as a young athlete, you're afraid of burnout. You're afraid of like specializing in one sport too young, but that's almost what it takes now. And money decisions, career decisions, where you're playing versus high school district versus who you're going to be your coach. These will all play a role into the decisions that you make that can ultimately lead you to whether you go pro as a first rounder, whether you go pro as, late round draft pick, whether you burn out and you fall by the wayside by the time you're 18. It's really crazy to see this dynamic moving forward.
And it is so interesting because we're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And actually the quote from LaMelo was, keep the main thing the main thing. At that age, at that time, the main thing is making it pro, is this idea that, and he's even quoted in the article, LaMelo saying, the league isn't where I get to and I get to slow down. The league is where life begins. And that brings up an interesting piece to me around opportunity cost. Yes, you have the opportunity to go and achieve this dream and this limelight that you have always imagined, but all the things that you're giving up, all the moments, all the time that is going to be invested in creating and developing you as a human and as somebody who's going to be successful in life are opportunity costs that you are now allowing to kind of walk out that door. And, you look at this reality, and for LaMelo Ball, for the number one draft pick potential in 2021, 2022, these are decisions that they are having to make. And what I fear is they are going to make a standard out of the exception. They are going to make a rule out of, LaMelo Ball, their father, the Ball family has been kind of a media sensation for the last 5 years. And it reminds me of my childhood. I'm one of 3 brothers. We were a basketball family. My father was very militaristic and disciplined on us. We worked as athletes as well as students. But when they start talking about, people growing up always thought their dad was crazy because of how they treated them, I understand that. It is what got me to the level I needed to get to. It's what got my brothers there too, that art of discipline. So as we look at it, we start to really see as you mentioned, the athlete that says, I'm going to enjoy it, I'm going to go 3 sports, I'm going to have some fun, is going to be passed up, if not just mentally from a clubs don't think you're focused enough, from a skill set, from an injury. But again, on the other side of that opportunity cost. I do love what the NBA is doing in creating this G League that is truly going to rival the NCAA. The modern day athlete right now is looking at college sports in this climate and starting to say the NC2A, no different than college, no different than athletic departments. You must evolve, and you must evolve quickly, or you are going to be passed up. Do you see this new development of the G League being a resource to rival the NC2A, and do you see a similar product being made in the soccer world?
Yeah, so and that's a great point. You already see it in the soccer world. In fact, the G League, and um, we can get on this on a later topic, but I feel like the XFL might do a similar model where the XFL turns into the G League for the NBA. But that's a different topic for another day. But you
Yeah.
see it in soccer where you have like these academies where you do the school and then you focus on soccer.
Mm.
You mentioned opportunity cost. I think that's really important. I remember my opportunity cost, and it's that dynamic of I didn't go to any high school dances. I missed all the social high school outings. I didn't go to any proms. I didn't do any of that. But ultimately, I made it pro.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity cost. My parents used to drive hour to and from for practice. Like that's the opportunity cost that, like you said, the standard versus the exception. And I think it's really important, not only for parents, but for players to understand that there's a big sacrifice that comes with it. When it comes to these unique opportunities now with G League, with academies, potentially XFL, it's going to give athletes a smoother transition to see what a pro environment is. But it also is going to give pressure to the NCAA and other organizations to really get their stuff together and understand that, not only do you need to provide, life skills, but you need to develop them as well. And it brings me to my next point in terms of
Well,
life skills.
wait, before we
Go ahead.
go there, because you were talking about the challenges the NCAA is facing, a topic we've discussed and will continue to discuss is this idea of NILs and what athletes are going to be able to possibly tap into in that space, in that world. You look at this alternative, this other option the top tier are going to have now. Not only are they going to get a massive base salary for this G League right now, it's $500,000, $500,000.
Yeah.
That is the rookie year in the NFL. That's an amazing income at 18. But then you look at the NILs, this chip the NCAA has been saying, all right, fine, we're going to give it to you. We'll let you have. It is eliminated immediately. This alternative throws NILs, throws any restrictions out the door. Give me an agent, give me a PR, a marketing team, and let me go get another couple $1 million in 1 year, as opposed to NILs. You got to go through all the red tape. And so I agree with you. I think this model of and again, we're talking about the top tier. We're talking about talent, not the average. But this is going to really challenge and shake up the NC2A, an institution that needs to adapt, evolve, and change a lot. But I interrupted you, and this is a topic I'm excited to get your input perspective on because it is so close to home. Go ahead and tell me what's happening with Messi, with this decision, and with why you make this kind of move.
Okay, yeah. So before we get on that, I want to touch on because I have a question with the life skill component. That how early do we need to talk about finances? Because now you're 17, 16, you're going to be getting into money now. These high school athletes are able to do deals with like overtime with different entities. What does it look like? Because if you're already not ready at 18, 19, or you're not going to be ready at 15, 16. So it's like, what principles do we need to teach them and at what age? And
I mean, beyond you look at, like, as you mentioned, social media, you can go make thousands of dollars on social media tomorrow. I personally developed a financial literacy course directed at about 15-year-olds. I'm looking at sophomore, junior year of high school students. But the reality is, if we can have a singular focus around financial literacy as a freshman, if you could have singular focuses in middle school, don't teach them the stock market, don't teach them details and specifics. In middle school, can you understand how you view money? Can you understand the history of money? As a freshman, can you start to understand a cash management strategy? So we are going to be forced as a culture, as a society, to push the knowledge down. Right now, there's not an average, there's not a traditional knowledge or course or class. That is what, a frugal athlete, that is what, conscious individuals are starting to say is, this is no longer a discussion. This is a demand. We need this. And I would say the philosophical perspective can start in middle school, starting in high school, you can get very practical in your advice of what and how to use money. Do you see it going that young?
Yeah, I think so. I think you got to go basics, basics. A fifth grader knows how to make a layup, knows how to make a 3-pointer, knows the history of basketball. So if you liken it to finance, get the basics down, and then as you get older, now you're doing 3-4 schemes, nickel packages, and then that's when you get complex. So like you, fullback of finance, a frugal athlete, this is where we come in and use sports analogies to translate to finances. So I just wanted to point that out because as these high school athletes start becoming CEOs of their own brands at a younger age, there's a lot that comes with it outside of just the athletic portion. And back to the topic of Messi and
this is interesting.
So probably the greatest athlete of all time. He has decided to make a move away from Barcelona. If you guys know, Barcelona has been his boyhood club. He's been there since he was 12, 13 years old. He's around 33 years old and 32, and he's looking to make a move. His base salary last year was $71 million, including incentives and different things like that. So for him to make a move, he has a contract stipulation where he's allowed to make a move without too much back and forth. Like Barcelona has to let him go without holding him hostage. He's done enough to Barcelona where he kind of deserves that. So I want to break it down because not every athlete, like we talked about standard versus exception, has this luxury of doing it. But for him to make this move, it affects the ecosystem of soccer as a whole. Yeah, so it's really crazy to see, like, there's bets to see where he goes, if he's going to go to Italy, if he's going to go to England, if he's going to stay at Barca. Like, his move is the domino effect to the world of soccer. And it just goes to show you that each piece on the chessboard affects the whole ecosystem. And whether you're Messi or not, you have to apply that to your own situation as well. So, for example, I got traded or you got traded. That means our piece falls, but that another piece comes in to replace us. We go to another team to replace someone else. All these things matter. It's just not a one-off situation.
I saw an infographic the other day of the top paid professional athletes throughout the last 20 years, and it's neat. It goes year to year and it changes models. Boxers dominated the 90s. And it goes through, and not until about 2017 do soccer football players start to get on the list. But then it ends in 2018, 2019 with 2 of the top 5 being soccer players. Messi obviously being one of them. When you talk about $71 million on the field, that's not including endorsements. Yeah. That's just on the field. It's really interesting to see this transition. So you see this decision. Is it, I liken it to like Joe Montana, played it for the Niners for so long and then went and ended his career with the Chiefs. Is it like Tom Brady just went to the Bucks? Is it obviously Barcelona doesn't want to see him leave. So for him, Is it financially driven or is it I need a new challenge?
It's a new challenge. It's a new challenge for sure. For someone like Messi, he's done all he can at Barca. They haven't given him the pieces to continue to be competitive. So it's a new challenge for him. Try something new. At this point, he's made plenty of money.
Enough.
So he's made enough. He's gonna still get compensated justly based on his worth. But it's not like I'm coming to get more money. It's more a new challenge.
Go salary cap for a minute. Is he the reason they could not have supplied him with a better team?
Yes and no. Yes and no. It's just the styles of play, different situations. Because with obviously there's financial fair play in world soccer, but there's really no salary cap when it comes to the team by team basis. It's just how pieces fit together.
There's no salary cap, but there's always a financial, consideration. Hey, we're giving this bro $70 million. A couple of you got to play for cheaper. Sorry.
Exactly.
That's how it works.
And speaking of people and new contracts, Budda Baker just became the most paid defensive safety. Can you talk?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Because I was reading the contract. $10.1 million signing bonus, guaranteed. I think around $14 million. What does that look like? Like, what are the first things you do when you sign that second contract, per se, in football terms? Everyone wants to go for that second contract. What does that look like?
I never got to experience it personally, but the first move has to become an estate issue. He just actually, it was 30 million guaranteed. It's averaging about 15 million a year. So when you look at $30 million coming to you, no matter what happens, you start having to look at estate taxes, both from a state and a federal perspective. And you start to having to look at how am I going to set up trusts and systems and accounts that are going to pass through and impact generations. $30 million should not only impact Buddha's kids, but his grandkids. And having it completed through the right way, that becomes a priority, number one. Number two would then look at the impact. What's the social impact does he want to go and have? And how are you going to philanthropically do that the most strategic way possible? But I would like to point out, once again, with the NFL not being guaranteed contracts, the highest paid safety a few years ago was Tyrann Mathieu, which most people remember as the Honey Badger. He signed the biggest safety contract, and not 2 years later was released from that contract. So you are a pay for play. Buddha was quoted as saying, now I got to go prove I'm the player that can do this. Why he got that kind of money was because last year Arizona didn't get beat deep very often. I think only like 2 or 3 plays over 30 yards. Number two, he comes up and stops the run, which is an interesting facet from a safety perspective. And then number three, he puts some pressure on the quarterback and gets in there and gets dirty. He is the full package. He actually went down the street from me to Bellevue High School and then to the awful rival of my university, the University of Washington. But this kind of contract, this kind of deal in this moment speaks to, a decade ago when we went through the CBA and the lockout, speaks to a few months ago as they were renegotiating some of the CBA. And it really starts to see the salary cap raise. But this contract came out months after it was supposed to because of the uncertainty and because of the time. So it was a huge payday, but nothing's guaranteed in the NFL.
No, that's a great point. Nothing's guaranteed. You always got to prove yourself. And like we alluded to earlier, you got to keep the main thing. So even though you got a big contract, you got to make sure you got to do everything in your power to keep that contract. And that's it for the week. I mean, we want to talk about one money principle that kind of ties into everything, dealing with income creep. Obviously, whether it's from high school to professional, from Olympians, planning 4 years to making that big summer or big winter move, and you outplay your competition, or even just sign a new contract. Dealing with income creep, both negatively and positively, like what's your advice on that?
Number one, you should always know what's walking out the door. That is going to sustain your plan. It's going to sustain your life. And so that lifestyle creep continues to go up. There's a monster out there called inflation that continues to drive up. No matter if you increase your spend or not, it goes up. Oftentimes, I don't like making guarantees, but the only guarantee I make with people in finances is that their outflow, their burn rate will increase. I think as athletes start to see these big contracts, they need to stop and think about, just because the top 1% is starting to see that kind of drastic increase does not mean the average player is seeing the same. And so they have to keep that scale and then truly start to measure what that burn rate is, and not only understand it, but protect it and have years of that money protected in their plan. How do you see income creep? How do you see lifestyle creep going forward for you still playing?
No, that's a great point. I think for me, it's like there's no point of making more money if you're going to have your expenses increase proportionally as you make more money. So dealing with income creep, the benefits of making more money is to use the difference between what you were currently on to now what you're on, and, taking home the profits, building generational wealth like you alluded to earlier. I think that's the biggest thing, where you have more money. Now you want your expenses to become proportionally even. It's like the big comparison. It's like, who's richer, the person that makes $1 million or the person that makes $100,000? And it really doesn't matter about the income, depending on the expenses ratio between the two individuals.
That's an excellent point. There's a major difference between rich and wealthy. Income creep is the definition of how you measure those two. Brother, another week in the books. Couldn't have enjoyed it more. loving this. Great information, great content, and man, I'm just excited to keep going.
Yeah, for sure. So that you guys heard it live and direct every Wednesday. Bank Shots, news and moves of the modern athlete. This will be repurposed on YouTube, audio, and if LinkedIn ever wants to, wake up, let us get on live on there. But with that being said, thanks again, Jed. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.
Enjoy.
Peace.